Escuchamos en todas de nuestras lecciones este fin de semana sobre la virtud más importante por los apóstoles y también por nosotros, discípulos de Jesús. Entonces, ¿cuál virtud es más importante por nosotros? Okay, obviously no one was paying attention. La virtud más importante es la virtud de amor. Escuchamos en nuestra segunda lectura esto de San Pablo por nosotros. Hermanos, puesto que Dios los ha elegido a ustedes, los ha consagrado a Él y les ha dado su amor, sean compasivos, magnánimos, humildes, afables y pacientes. Sopórtense mutuamente y perdónense cuando tengan quejas contra otro, como el Señor los ha perdonado a ustedes. Y sobre todas estas virtudes tengan amor, que es el vínculo de la perfecta unión. Entonces, por nosotros es muy importante para invitar la virtud de amor entre cada parte de nuestras vidas. No solo las partes que es bien, pero necesitamos el amor de Dios en cada parte de nuestras vidas. Y en nuestras mentes y corazones también. Y este fin de semana celebramos la Sagrada Familia. Una familia que es un modelo de fe por nosotros. Pero los padres de Dios no fue perfecta. No hay pecados con María, pero hay cosas no perfectas. Por ejemplo, en nuestro evangelio de hoy. Many times we struggle with what it means for us to be a parent, how we are called to live our lives. We think that if we make one mistake, all hell is broken loose. I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to that were so saddened and so nervous at becoming parents for the first time. What if we make a mistake? What if that one thing we say or we do makes our kids go in a bad direction? What if we lose our kids at Walmart? Or what if we leave them at the gas station? Well, Mary and Joseph left Jesus for 3 days in Nazareth or in Jerusalem. I think it's going to be okay. Many times in life we try so much to be perfect that we forget that perfection is not a virtue. Una vida perfecta es imposible porque somos pecadores. We are sinners. Now we are called to live striving for perfection, but also realizing that we're not going to get there. And that's okay. But also many times in life I hear parents saying, man, I wish when we got married we had a guidebook about how we're called to be husband and wife and how we're called to be parents. And then I say again, did you listen to the readings this weekend? What did we hear in our first reading about it? We heard about how husbands are supposed to treat their wives. We hear about how fathers are supposed to treat their children and how children are supposed to love and respect not only their fathers, pero sus madres también. In my household growing up, I talk about this a lot. The fourth commandment was brought up a lot. ¿Cuál es número 4 en los mandamientos? Honor sus padres. ¿Por qué es importante? Porque es el primer mandamiento después de los 3 mandamientos sobre nuestra relación con Dios. The first commandment that God gives us outside of the ones that have to do with him, are all about honoring and respecting our parents. Why would God do that? Because he wants to show us something, as he wants to show us something in this weekend's readings, that to truly love is to be obedient. El problema es porque en nuestro mundo ahora, una vida con obediencia es malo. We don't want to be obedient. We want to make our own path. We're free, right? And so we can make our own choices. Sí, somos libres para hacer algunas cosas, pero cada decisión tienes también responsabilidad y una respuesta. Every action has a consequence. Por ejemplo, if you have a test coming up and you study for it, what is the probable consequence for that? The more you study, the better you do, right? También, si tienes un examen y no estudias, la consecuencia probablemente es malos marcos en su examen, ¿sí? And that's just a small example of how actions have consequences. You're free to study or not study. You're free to love God or not love God. You're free to embrace his commandments or sin all day long. Just be prepared for the consequences. I'm not saying that to try and put fear in you, but to remind us that part of love is obedience. Firstly, to God, so that then we can be obedient to those who are in charge of us, to our parents, to our bosses, to our teachers, to our music directors, heck, even to our pastors every once in a while. It's a bizarre concept, I know. And yet, we do it not because we have to, but because ultimately we're seeking to embrace the virtue of love. You know, I love our second reading today because when you see the difference in language, sometimes we see the difference in intention. In St. Paul's second reading today, in English, it says, "Wives, be subordinate to your husbands." En español, "Mujeres, respeten la autoridad de sus maridos." La palabra y la idea es muy diferente. It's so different that growing up, I never heard this portion of the reading, because there's an option to not invite it in, because it can be sometimes controversial. In our world, if I was to come to you and said, "Women, you are supposed to be subordinate to all the men," you're like, "Excuse me? No, I don't think so." Right? But that's not what it says. Respect the authority of your husband, as the church respects the authority of Christ, who is head of the body. That doesn't mean if your husband says to do something, you have to do it. What it says is, as your husband, he shouldn't ask you to do anything that is not for the greater good of the couple. And as wife, how do you then, out of love and obedience, respond? Sometimes it's, "I don't think so." Because sometimes we aren't thinking about what's important for the couple. We're thinking about what I want. But that's not what's important in the gospel. That's not what's important for us as Catholics and Christians. What's important isn't what I want. What's important is what we need. Hay una palabra en Oklahoma que es muy perfecta por esta. It's not about what he wants and about what she wants. La palabra, it's about what's most important for y'all. That's right, I said y'all in a homily and it worked out perfect. Because that's ultimately what it's about. We hear many times at marriages that the two become one flesh. That it's no longer about what he wants and about what she wants, but it's truly about what's best for y'all as a family. And that's why it's so important for us to see the importance of the gifts that God gives to us. Y la don más importante por nosotros para recibir y para vivir y para dar por otra gente es el don de la virtud de amor. Porque sin amor tenemos nada. Sin amor no hay esperanza. Sin amor no hay vida eternamente en cielo. Sin amor no hay creación. Porque Dios es amor. And so if you're looking and searching for, okay, well, God, what is it that you're calling me to do and how are you calling me to live? Do I need to make this decision or go down this path or this path? La más importante pregunta es, ¿cuál dirección ayúdate con embracar amor más? Y si los dos direcciones ayúdate, no es importante cuál elijas. Esto fue mi problema durante el seminario. Porque para mí, mi pregunta de Dios es, ok, Dios, tengo problemas. Me gusta una vida de sacerdote, me gusta una vida de matrimonio. Ahora es imposible por los dos. Entonces, ¿cuál prefieres? La respuesta de Dios, sí. Sí. It wasn't a yes or no question. It was an A or B. Sí. Dios, ¿en serio? Porque con los dos hay la oportunidad para embrasar amor. Entonces los dos, por cada persona, es posible. Eso es la razón por cada de nuestros niños dentro de la iglesia, I always ask, gentlemen, have you ever thought about being a priest? Oh, no. I like girls too much. Okay, that's not the question that I asked you. I didn't ask if you liked girls. I asked, have you considered making the biggest sacrifice that God can ask from you, from taking what you like to doing what you love, and what can bring others to love? Y la misma respuesta y pregunta por los niñas. Ladies, if you are not married, have you ever considered giving your life to God as a sister or a nun? No, Padre. ¿Por qué? Because I like boys. I'm not asking if you like boys. No fue mi respuesta, mi pregunta. My question was, are you willing to make a sacrifice of what you want for how God can truly bless you by blessing others? And He can do that through marriage. He can do that by dedicating your life to Him as well. That no, as an adult that is not married, you can't have relations with someone. You can't. No. Es un pecado. But there's more to life than that. There's more to marriage than that as well. ¿Cuál es más importante en su matrimonio? La más importante cosa en su matrimonio es para ayudar a su marido para entrar al cielo. The most important part of marriage is how you help your spouse get to heaven. Nothing else. Everything else is extra. The most important part of getting married is to help your spouse get to heaven. St. Paul even speaks of it in the New Testament. The problem, though, is we live in such a world that doesn't believe that heaven exists, and even more horribly, doesn't believe that hell exists, and believes if you're a good enough person, you're going to go to heaven. Es una mentira. Solo nadie de nosotros tiene esperanza en cielo. Con Dios y el sacrificio de Jesús en la cruz, todos de nosotros teníamos la esperanza para una vida eternamente en cielo. There's nothing that you can do that can gain a place for you in heaven. There is something you can do to gain a place in hell. And that is to ultimately turn your back on God, to embrace sin instead of love, to not be afraid in the sense of fear and awe of God, to not be sorry for what you've done that objects to the law and the love of God. And so ultimately, my brothers and sisters, as always, remember that God loves you. And that's why we are called to be obedient. Kids to your parents, husbands to your wives, wives to your husbands, and every single one of us to the love of God. Not because we have to, but because He doesn't have to give us all of the blessings that He does. But because He loves us so much, He offers them to us. And so the loving and natural response will be to receive them and use them as well. But it's your choice. You can receive it and use it, or you can receive it and throw it away. My hope this year is that each and every one of us will truly seek to embrace God's love. Because there's enough chaos outside these walls. There's no place for it in our hearts or in our family of faith.